Hey there, I'm Misty from Creatively Misty. Thank you so much for joining me again for our how-to collage tutorials. These are just a couple little easy techniques on how to get started with collaging. So the first thing that we have is, this one is just a little piece of watercolor paper, heavy-duty watercolor paper. I have a paintbrush, and I'm going to be using Mod Podge in a matte finish. You can also use a gel medium in a matte finish as well. So to get started, what you're going to do is you're going to take a piece of paper. This could be scrapbook paper. This could be a piece of tissue paper that you made yourself, something you made with a gel plate, anything like that, something that's got really cool texture on it. It's really cool because we do have a very blank surface here. So we're going to kind of want to actually fill this up today. So what I'm going to start doing is I'm just going to start tearing off chunks so that we can start filling in this page here. And I'm going to kind of lay them out so I can see where I think I might want them to go. This just kind of helps me see how much of them I need and what kind of shapes and things I need as well. Okay, and then once you make sure you've got everything covered, you can move on to the next step. Next step is to actually glue everything down. This is where your Mod Podge or your gel medium come in. And you're just going to kind of go in here and you're going to start gluing them where you had them, or if you want to change it up and move them around, you can do that too. You just want to make sure that you have a very small amount of Mod Podge on there. You don't want a ton of liquid sitting underneath your pieces. And you want to make sure you get the entire surface down. You don't want anything sticking up off of it. I'm going to use my brayer to go ahead and make sure everything's nice and snug, pushed down completely. And this is just another one of my collaging techniques that I use. It just depends on what kind of surface I'm using it on. If you saw the last one with my art journal, I kind of actually used less collaging pieces because I wanted a lot of that background to show through. So this one here, I don't want any of my background to show. I want the entire thing to be a collage piece. That's why I am using this technique instead. My brayer had something on it, so it rolled off on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and smudge that in. It'll look like a little layer. It's not a big deal. I'm just going to go ahead and keep on gluing everything down. All right, so once you got everything exactly where you want it and it's all glued down, you just want to be sure that there are no pieces of background showing through. For this particular technique, you want every single piece of background to be covered up with your paper for your collage. And then you want to let it completely dry. You want to make sure all your moisture is out from underneath of it and then 100% dry. So after that, you can move on and it'll be adding color, adding texture, adding a focal point, whatever it is you decide to do with it after that. Okay, so next step for me is going to be actually adding a tiny bit of acrylic over the top of it, just because I do want to soften some of this so that I can add my focal point to it. So I'm just going to use my antique parchment, which is a ivory white color. I don't want it to be stark white because then it won't really match what I'm doing on here. And I'm just going to pour a little tiny bit of it on here. And then I'm going to use my brayer. And I'm just going to go over this. And really pull some of those colors into the background. Soften them up. Drag them back. And the longer you go over it with your brayer, the softer the colors will be as well. Okay. Okay, and then once that layer is dry, I'm going to use a StazOn ink. You want to use this because I'm going to be using a lot more watered down mediums, so you don't want it to smudge or anything. So StazOn is pretty important. I'm also going to be using this honeycomb stamp, and I'm just going to put a few little pieces here and there. I want them to look like they're blending into the background. I don't want them to be full pieces. So see how some of them are a lot lighter than others? It kind of looks like it's playing with the background a little bit. Alrighty, so on this piece, I want to add some really cool drips down it. Now that we've got a little bit of our background established. So what I did was I just took a basic acrylic. These are really thin, which is why I love them. And I just added it to a ton of water so that I get this really thin layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hold my brush up like this. And then I'm going to use it to drip paint down it. And if for any reason it doesn't happen to be watery enough for you or it's not dripping enough, you can also just spray it down, add some water in there. See how it kind of dripped down there? Gave it a little pop of pink in there. Okay. Now you can either leave it here to dry. You could also use a hair dryer or a heat gun or something like that and heat it up so that the color stays the way it is. Or you can do what I'm doing and you're just going to kind of dry it off a little tiny bit. Now I'm just going to go back on the other side and just add in a little tiny bit more. A couple more drips here and there. And the reason I did that is because I really just liked that pink, vibrant pink that was in there. And I just want to pull it out to the surface a little tiny bit more so that I have this really pretty pink back on here. Now that everything's dry, I'm going to go ahead and add in a focal point. And to do that, I'm going to use just a stamp of a rose or a flower on a clear block. I'm also going to use my StazOn. When in doubt, if something might smudge or if you're going to use something that might cause something to smudge, I just use a StazOn because it stays on pretty much anything. Doesn't matter what you put over the top of it, it will stay in place. So I'm just going to put my flower right here. I'm just going to press it down as hard as I can because with the collage on there, certain pieces might not show up because it's an uneven surface. So I want to make sure I get as many of them as possible on there. Okay, now I'm just going to add some leaves to it. So again, I'm using my StazOn. And I'm going to put them kind of where I think the stem is going to go. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to add some color to it. And I'm going to do that again by just using a craft acrylic, and I'm going to add water to it so that you can actually see some of that background color through it. And as far as painting goes, if you want it to be, you know, more see-through, use more water. If you want it to be more bold, and so you can't see as much of that background through it, just use less water or don't use water at all. You could also use colored pencils or pastels or crayons or markers or anything else that you would like to use over it. You don't have to use paint. I just like paint. These here, these are actually done with colored pencil. So you can use anything you want on them. Gives it a little bit extra different texture if you use colored pencil. Or pastels or crayons or something else. You get a little bit more of a different texture than you get with the acrylics. I think I might add one more leaf to it, kind of down here in this corner. Okay, so there's my new leaf. And in case anybody is curious why I went with a blue flower, first of all, because I love blue, it's my favorite color, so why not? And secondly, I was actually pulling out some of this blue that was in the background before, and that's why I went ahead and used that particular color. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to do to this particular piece is I'm going to take my colored pencil again, and I'm just going to go through here, and I'm just going to sharpen up some of these edges. And I'm using the colored pencil just because, first of all, I had it already, and secondly, I kind of want it to have that rough edge to it. If I were to use a marker or something, it wouldn't exactly match these leaves over here. It would look more metallic or shiny, and I want it to actually match the pattern of my stamp here. So I'm going to go ahead and use the pencil for that. Okay, and I changed my mind. I'm going to do one more thing here real quick. So this here is a paint marker by Arteza. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of add a little tiny bit of metallic pop here into the center. And again, I chose the gold because I don't know if you can see it, but there are these little tiny splashes of yellow in here. They look kind of gold to me from where I'm sitting in the light, so I'm just using a little tiny bit of gold to mirror those. So I just went through there and added a little tiny bit of metallic, and it also gives it a little bit of a raised edge once it finishes. Okay, so now if you wanted, you could put a saying on it. You could go ahead and wash over the top of it and make it a little bit lighter. You can do pretty much anything you want from here. I'm going to be done and just call it quits here because I like it nice and super simple for this particular piece. So I hope you enjoyed the collage technique again, and I will see you next time.